Blade Runner was released in 1982 and was directed by Ridley Scott, one of the most significant sci-fi directors out there, and this movie itself is considered to be one of the best sci-fi movies of all time. I thought I'd go back and review the first Blade Runner because Blade Runner 2049 is coming out tonight. I'm really excited, and I thought I would refresh my memories of the first Blade Runner to get prepared for this new film. And yes, of course, I'm going to be talking about the final cut. I think the final cut or the director's cut, or whichever cut, the director's cut or the final cut, is definitely the cuts that you should be watching. The theatrical release has narration that just doesn't work.
New climax. Recreational facility.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession.
The narration just kind of takes away from this mellow, dark, mysterious tone of the first film, and I just like the final cut. It's what Ridley wanted to do in the first place, and also the ending that's involved with the final cut, it's like so abrupt, and you're left thinking like, what happened? Like, where are these characters going? And I like the idea that this film, the final cut at least, ends with the audience just doesn't know, and it's left to interpretation. So Blade Runner is about Rick Deckard, who is brought back into the scenes of the Blade Runner business when 4 artificial beings called replicants have escaped from a facility, and it's up to Deckard to reprise his role as a Blade Runner to find these beings, but as he is investigating, he starts to contemplate whether or not this is a good moral standard to hunt these people down. He already doesn't want to do it anymore, and he meets this new replicant called Rachel that really makes him think about the humanity that is inside these replicants. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about Blade Runner. It isn't your conventional sci-fi movie, and that's totally okay. Ridley Scott is known for making these movies that aren't just about being sci-fi and action films. There's not even a lot of action in Blade Runner whatsoever, and I think that's why the regular moviegoer has certain thoughts on the movie. If you're just a regular person wanting to watch a film that's equivalent to, say, Star Wars or Die Hard or anything in the 80s, Blade Runner isn't really that kind of film. It's a very sci-fi-esque film, yes, but the film actually deals with the idea of what it actually means to be human. You have these people, or these replicants, that are hunted down, and if you kind of think about it, there really isn't any difference besides their super strength that make them any different from human beings. They're just artificially made, so that's the only reason. So because of that only one thing, that they're artificially made and they're somewhat different, it brings that idea of prejudiceness into the film, and it circles around that a lot. And Ridley Scott has explored that in his past films, and even his present films, where he kind of deals with the idea of humanity, humanity's fears, and what humanity thinks of death, and what they do in order to avoid said death. Because that is the main fear of humanity, is the fear of dying. And just because these replicants can only survive for 4 years, and they try to figure out some way in order to survive, that kind of makes them human. Even though they're artificially made, and they only have 4 years to survive, they're still trying to figure out a way in order to sustain themselves. So it kind of brings the idea forth that they're not human, but they're still humanity in these forms. It is a very philosophical film, and I think the whole context of it is why a lot of people don't particularly like to watch Blade Runner over and over. Like I said, it's not your conventional film. It's just a film that you can watch and really appreciate. There's a lot of philosophy in there, and you have to look very in-depth into this film, because there's also a lot of imagery that is very left to interpretation, in terms of Deckard himself, his way of thinking, and the idea, and this is just kind of a fan theory, is Deckard a replicant? Now, this is something that's been kind of pondered on for many years now. I don't think Deckard is a replicant. I mean, the movie tonight might prove otherwise, but I think that's just, if he was a replicant, that's such a conventional way of saying, oh, I'm a replicant, now I have to, like, help this girl Rachel out because she's also a replicant. But I think that just takes away from the deeper meaning of the film, where we have this regular human guy who's just human, he's not a replicant, where he comes to terms where these replicants are manufactured, their memories aren't their memories, but even though they're not their memories, they're still human beings. They still have feelings, and they still have things to take away from those false memories. So in terms of the idea of Deckard being a replicant, I don't really like that theory. I mean, it could be true. There's a lot of things that say that he could, but I like just the general idea of this is just a regular guy who comes to terms with even though that these replicants are manufactured, they are able to maintain some human emotion. And there's also the idea that the replicant, even though they start off with no human emotions, there's that one quote that someone says is, even though that they start off with no human emotions, throughout the 4-year span of their life, they can kind of grow human emotion. Anger, fear, happiness. Isn't that kind of the same thing as a human being, where we start off as a baby and as we progress in life, we gain emotions? So that's kind of growing as a human being. They start off as replicants and they grow human. I really like the philosophy in this film. Even though it's not like a film that I would watch over and over again, it's got a lot to say, and I really appreciate Ridley Scott for that. If you don't like the philosophy or the script or the story of this film, I totally understand. It's a lot to dabber into. But let's talk about the physical film itself, the look and feel, the tone, and the style of it. That's the most I like about this film. I think what Ridley Scott is really well known for is taking two categories of film and combining them together. With Alien, we had sci-fi and horror. He's really good at that. With this, he took sci-fi and he combined this noir kind of story where it was kind of just this LA detective kind of movie. And with the first theatrical release of the film, I understand why they tried to add the narration. I get it. Noirs have narration. But for this, it doesn't work. Without the narration, it's really better. I like the director's cut and the final cut more than the theatrical release. I get what they were trying to do, but they really needed to add to the theme of what this film was going for. Because the theatrical release, it tries to explain it to you.
I'd quit because I'd had a belly full of killing. But then I'd rather be a killer than a victim. I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before.
And it's like, okay, well now I can't bring my own interpretations into play. So that's just why I like the final cut, is because you get to interpret it on your own. The cinematography in this is also really good. When you're trying to make a noir kind of story, it has to be dark. It has to be edgy. And LA is the perfect kind of location for this detective kind of story. And if you notice while you're watching the film, there is barely any sunlight whatsoever. A lot of the film takes place at night, it's raining, and that is just, I love it. I love the cinematography in this, the lighting's really good. I love the usage of neon lights, light from billboards. It just looks like a really dark, edgy noir film with sci-fi elements. I love the physicality of this film more than I do the actual story and the philosophy. It's just a nice film to look at. I really like looking at this film, and for anybody who is trying to become a director of photography in film, definitely check out Blade Runner. It's a perfect example of how to do cinematography in film. So yes guys, that was my kind of thoughts on Blade Runner from 1982. Comment down below what you thought of this movie if you've seen Blade Runner, like the video, share it, and please subscribe to Pixel Talk if you haven't yet for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and gaming content. I'm so excited to be seeing Blade Runner 2049 tonight. I'm going to be giving you my thoughts in my next video, and I look forward to that. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey, and this is Pixel Talk.